Welcome, everyone, to the Monday Mindset. I am Tracy Rader, the Director of Implementation here at Giant, and I'm with Kevin DeShazo. Kevin runs our sports division called Culture Wins. So if it's your first time joining us, we appreciate you coming and tuning in and spending a little bit of time with us. So I can't believe how fast Monday comes around, but we are back at another Monday. We are on our way to end 2020. I know you're sad about that, Kevin, especially after not having some electricity for the last, 12 days?
Yeah, 12, 13 days, no electricity. Pretty par for the course for 2020. But it is, to get to your point, it's crazy. We're in November. It's not just another Monday, like how fast Monday gets around, but we're into November now. We're almost halfway through November. So we are quickly approaching 2021.
It's true, yes. So the election, that's kind of behind us, but not really. Lots of crazy stuff going on in this world. So let's just put a big bow on 2020 and send it off here in a few weeks, and we'll be ready and rearing to go for 2021. So I'm anticipating 2020.
I'm excited. I think 21 is going to be a great year. Absolutely.
I think so too. Well, love the Monday Mindset with you. I love how you can kind of redirect us in the right direction. If we've gotten off in the last 7 days from the last time you talked to us about our mindset and how, and even in adversity, last week we talked about that, we can still have a steady mindset. So tell us about today. What are we going to cover today?
Yeah, I want to continue to kind of build off of that. And if you've been watching Monday Mindset since we launched this, a couple months ago, you notice some consistent themes. And to your point, it's if you got off course in the last week, that's okay. Like we want to give ourselves grace to be off course, but also continue to get to be as close as we can to being on course, right? Like acknowledge that we fell off the track, that we messed up, but say, hey, that's not who we are. We're going to keep showing up and keep getting better. And that's what each week and what each day is about. And so today I want to talk about, it's similar to this idea of adversity, but mostly about like what gives your mindset power? Like where do you give the power over your mindset to? And you mentioned the election, and I think it's really important to talk not about the results of the election. We're not going to go into left or right because I'm just not really concerned about that. I'm kind of politically homeless. But I want to talk about the mindset in the midst of it. And so what I spend a lot of time on social media, maybe too much time on social media. I've spent a lot of the past decade helping college athletes and coaches and administrators use social media in a better, more intentional way. And so I pay attention to that space. And what I saw a lot of last week, again, this is from both sides. So take off your red or blue lens and put on your human lens, put on your leader lens, and really even maybe put up a mirror to see how you operated last week. Because what I saw a lot of people responding with anxiety, with fear, with stress, with hopelessness. And it was really fascinating to watch people who just sat on their phone or in front of their TV, scrolling through social media, waiting for the next update, but filled with despair throughout the entire thing, filled with worry throughout the entire thing. Is my candidate going to win? Is my candidate going to lose? And it was just destroying their mindset because they spent 3 to 4 days in a panic, in a worry, in an anxiety, instead of doing the work that was in front of them. And yes, I know presidential elections are important. Don't hear what I'm not saying. But if that was your mindset throughout the week, that means you weren't giving your best to your family. You weren't giving your best to your work. You weren't giving your best to your team. You were kind of going through the motions with those things because all of your energy and your mindset was determined by this outside force. And then I've seen people, now that the election is over, people are posting on social media that I've woken up today for the first time in years with no existential dread. Today is the first day in years I've woken up with hope. Oh, today, guys, I am scared and I am worried. Guys, get ready. Bad news is coming. So again, it's from both sides, these unhealthy mindsets. And I think it's really critical to understand what's happening and to say, hey, if that's us, we're not leading effectively. We're not leading ourselves effectively. What we've done in that situation is you've given the power of your mindset over to something else, over to someone else, right? Regardless of who is in the White House, regardless of who is your boss, regardless of what's going on around you, you get to own your mindset. And I do want to, I recognize as a white male, there's a bit of privilege. And so I understand that. I understand that certain populations can be impacted more by elections, fully aware of those things. I get it. But let's not use these things as a reason to live in a negative way, right? Because no matter who was named president-elect or president over the weekend, you still have a job to come to today. A job that demands your best. You have a team that demands your best. You have a family, if you're married and you have kids, that demands your best. Whether it's your guy in the White House or not, you have work to do. You have a life to lead. You have a duty to show up as your best each day. And so we hear this phrase all the time, to focus on what you can control, right? Control the controllables. If you can't control it, don't worry about it. If you can control it, don't worry about it. But I saw a lot of people last week really focused on the thing that they can't control, really worried about the thing that they can't control. So again, regardless of outcome, you get to show up and live and lead your life. You can still care about the same things. You can still fight for the same things. You can still believe in the same things, regardless of whether or not the candidate you want is in the White House. Your hope, your peace, your purpose should not be dictated by that outside force. Because what happens if we are, life's just this roller coaster, right? If your candidate won, you're on this high for honestly a couple days, and then you'll probably realize they're not perfect and they're going to do things that you disagree with, and then you're going to be frustrated. And so you're going to take this dip. And maybe your candidate lost, and so you've taken this dip, you're anxious, you're fearful, you're nervous. Well, then pretty soon you're going to realize that life's going to be okay, right? We've had presidents from the left to the right. Life has generally been okay for the most part. And so you realize that it's like, okay, no, I have work to do, and you're going to go back to normal. Well, what if we didn't have to go back to normal? What if we could just lead ourselves in the midst of this and not let our mindset be determined and dictated by outside forces, by outside people? And I think it's what is your purpose, right? And I'm not saying, by the way, to ignore elections. I'm not saying to not vote. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be aware of what's going on or be informed. I think that's great. But you can be aware of something without being consumed by it. We've talked about this kind of with the COVID situation. It's the same thing. If people have just been consuming COVID news and they're living with fear and anxiety because that's just what they're consuming. And what you consume, you start to crave. And so it's, hey, we can't really control that. I can just control what I can control. I can control me. I can control my mindset. And if I'm so focused on this outside force, then I'm giving up the power of my mindset, which really means I'm giving up influence. Because a lot of people, the way that they've lived and led and acted last week, again, both sides, it undermines credibility, because then you're going to come back to your team. You're going to say, hey, control what we can control. It's like, well, you didn't. You spent a week, days, months, whatever, freaking out and nervous and anxious about this thing that you couldn't control. So it's hard to come in and say, to tell us to control what we can control, because you didn't live it. So don't hear that as criticism. It's just calling us up to say, we don't have to live that way. Leaders don't have to live that way. You get to control your mindset. You get to own who you are each day. That's the power that you actually have. And when you live that way, there's a lot more fruit that comes from that, a lot more peace that comes from that. And so, Tracy, let's talk about this idea of the peace index, because really what it is a lack of peace, right? And so we've talked about the peace index before. And I think what's really interesting is a lot of people over let's just use the last week again, take the election season. I know it's more than a week, but the last week and a half, most people, their purpose was okay. Their place was okay, right? Didn't really change. They were in their house, in their office, right? Place was fine. People, their relationships were what they were. Now, maybe if your family believes something different, maybe that was strained a little bit. Provision financially, you're probably fine. Again, I know it's pandemic. There's always potential of job loss and those things. But for most people, it was this quadrant right here, this circle, that as over the last week, if they were to say they weren't at peace, it was here. And we used to just say this is physical health. But we want to be all encompassing to say this is physical health, this is mental health, this is emotional health, this is spiritual health. All these things impact your health. And I think for most people last week, it was the mental and emotional piece. They let an outside force, an outside person, an outside circumstance dictate whether or not they were at peace. So people have asked, hey, what do you think about the election? Like, it is what it is. Like, whether my person won or lost doesn't really matter. It's like I cast my vote and then I went on with life. And so I'm not up or down based on who's in the White House. I can have opinions, right? I can be aware. I can have some thoughts, But in terms of the way that I show up, like I want to be consistent with who I am with my wife. I want to be consistent with who I am with my kids. I want to be consistent with who I am with my friends and with the team, or with teams that I work with. I think about this a lot from a lens of, through the lens of fatherhood, because my kids, I know they're watching me. Right? They're watching how I act towards my wife always. Right? They're seeing what it means to be a husband. They're seeing what it means to be a working man. They're seeing what it means for me to be a friend. And around this election, we had a lot of conversations with our 11-year-old and our 9-year-old around the election. We watched a lot of the coverage with them because they got really interested. They're old enough, not fully get it, but to have an interest. And I want them to see, like, hey, how did dad respond? Whether the person dad voted for won or lost, did he freak out? Was he too excited? Right? As if like this is did he give more significance to it than it's actually due? Or was dad? Right? He's like, all right, here's the outcome. Now let's keep rolling. Let's keep working. We are who we are, regardless of who's in the White House. So I think a lot of it from that perspective as a dad, but I think this is the circle that really took people out last week. They were anxious, they were depressed, they were overly excited, they were overly emotional. And it's that mental and emotional piece that they let somebody else dictate.
That's really good. Great point about fatherhood. And I just think, I bet of people watching, adults watching, if they thought about their childhood and maybe either their mother or their father, and they were watching and they thought, okay, dad's favorite football team lost, so we kind of have to tiptoe around dad today. Or, mom, whatever her thing was, didn't go so well, so no, she's locked in her room and no one's talking to mom today. Well, again, to your point, that's influence lost. So are we making people around us ride an emotional roller coaster because whatever we thought was supposed to be didn't happen, and now, we're all up in a frenzy, and
That's right.
It's not fair to the people around us. It's not fair to ourselves.
No, and it's not. Again, know yourself to lead yourself, right? Know what triggers you, good or bad. So no, I'm going to show up I'm going to control who I am, right? If your candidate lost and you're just down, like in a bad mood, stressed and anxious and angry for the next 2 weeks, think about the influence that you're losing with your team. Think about the impact that you're having on your team and on your family. And what they're really thinking, by the way, is like, really, that really impact, like, you were going to spend the next 2 weeks or however long, like, throwing a fit. Same thing if your candidate won, the candidate you voted for won, you're on this crazy high. And again, like, be happy, right? Be happy, celebrate. Like, I'm not saying emotions are unhealthy, right? We can't be dictated by our emotions. And so you're on this crazy high. Now, are they going to think, well, just wait, he's going to come down in 2 weeks, right? Just wait till the shine wears off, and she's going to be, this is not normal. Well, they're in this limbo state too of like, okay, can we approach? Can we not? Because like, can we talk about work, or is it just all election because they're just so happy right now? Like, that's got to be everything. When can we get back? And so it's both sides of it, right? The two highs are bad, two lows are bad, right? And again, it's not about being stoic. It's not about not having emotion. It's just saying, hey, I've got emotions. You can be happy or sad or whatever, but that doesn't have to dictate how you show up. You say, hey, you know what? The person I voted for didn't win, but I have this, and this that are in my control. The person I did win, I voted for won. Awesome. Well, you still have this, and this that you have to do and that you have to control, and people that you have to lead. And so it's influence matters, right? And we can't, especially in these times of adversity, times of maybe significant outside events, like that's a test for leadership, right? It's like your character. Are you who you say you are? And winning or losing shouldn't dictate your mindset, right? Whatever happened shouldn't dictate your character. Our character is not circumstantial, right? It's not convenient based on our belief system. Our character is our character. And so I think it's again, a mirror for us as leaders. We talk about the mirrors and the lenses, right? This is mirror time to look in the mirror and say, how did I show up last week? What did I really let dictate and determine my mindset, my peace? And I think it really goes back ultimately to say, like, what's your real purpose? Because your physical, your mental and emotional health overtook your purpose probably last week, based on what I saw from a lot of people. It's like, no. Purpose needs to drive those things. right? Those things don't determine how I show up around my purpose. My purpose should be driving those things, because my purpose is where I find fulfillment, right? My purpose is where some peace comes from. And so I think it's a really critical thing to always be aware of how we're showing up and what's impacting our mindset.
That's good. Yeah, I'm looking at the other components of this index here, and I could see how, just depending on your own personality, how you could let one of these circles dictate, not just the PMES, which we're kind of focused on today, but I think, if some people are such people that they let the people in their life dictate their mindset. So if their kids are obeying, if their spouse is being kind to them, if their coworkers are working hard and doing what they're asking them to do, then their world is fine. Then they can be a nice leader. Then they can be a gung-ho leader. But when one of those people in their life isn't complying with what their expectation is, then their mindset falls apart. Well,
that's right.
They were vulnerable all along to their mindset.
That's right.
Because their mindset was based on circumstances or people or events or whatever instead of.
That's right.
Yeah. So. And
that's the piece, right? So we're talking about having an invincible mindset versus having a vulnerable mindset. An invincible mindset means like, who you are. You're secure and you're confident and humble in who you are. You dictate how you show up, right? So let's take the election out of it. Maybe you have a bad boss, to your point. So the people part of it, maybe you have a bad boss. That's not an excuse for you to be a bad leader. Like if you're leading people, but your leader is bad, well, that shouldn't dictate your mindset with your team, right? Like they're not making you be a bad leader. They're not making you be a stressed or an anxious or a negative leader. Like you are doing that. You're not choosing to do it, but you're not choosing to not do that, right? And so say, no, this is my team, regardless of how I'm being led, regardless of what's going. This is how I'm going to, regardless of what they believe. This is how I'm going to show up. And so, but too many people are vulnerable to outside circumstances, outside events, outside people, and letting that determine how they live, how they think, how they show up. And once you realize like this, you have control over this. You don't have to ask permission to have a good mindset. You don't need somebody to tell you to have a good mindset. You get to own it. Once you get that, like once you really, really get like, hey, the world is what it is. I get to choose how I show up. That is such a freeing, that's not a burden. Like that's a really freeing thing to realize like, okay, I can disagree with that person and disagree with this person and disagree with this event and agree with this person, agree with that person, agree with this event. I'm me. None of those have to shape who I am. And when you get to that place, and again, the expectation, if you're hearing this and you're not there, I don't know that I am either, right? It's a daily battle, right? It's a daily struggle to show up and attempt to be that person. And so I think to realize like it's a powerful and freeing place to be. And that's really where influence comes from, because what will happen is life happens, right? There are ups and there are downs, there are challenges, there are obstacles, there's adversity, there's wins and there's losses. And what people are going to see from you, like, man, she's really steady. Like she doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low. She's not a robot, right? Like she celebrates, she has joy. You can see that there's pain and loss. Like those things are all there, but she is who she is. Like she's steady. Well, that's a person we want to follow, right? They're not going to be thrown about to and fro by the ways of the world, by good days and bad days. Like they just are who they are. Those are the leaders that we want to follow. Those are leaders that earn trust, leaders that we always talk about, like want the team to trust, want the team to buy in. Well, you earn that by the kind of leader that you are. In your times of success and in your times of failure, you get to own your mindset.
So true. So true. So speaking of this, Giant has just released something really cool and new, and it's a new series on mindset. And it looks like this. It's 16 different episodes on mindset. And what's cool is it's very peaceful. If you click on one, let me see here. I can get one to go. It just gives you kind of an exercise for the day, just to set your mind in the right place. And they're kind of surrounding the different tools that we teach from. So as you see, here's one on the core and here's one on the peace index. And it just gives you some moments. I mean, they're all short, for about 4 minutes each. It just gives you some moments to reflect and to get your mind clear and started for the day, I would suggest people just come in here and pick one maybe every morning if you can, every other day, whatever you have time for. But they're really good, aren't they, Kevin?
We were talking about this before we hopped on the call. I think personality plays into this. So as a connector, I get fired up about this type of stuff. Mindset for me, I think, is such a critical thing. I think this will be some of the most important content we will ever put on the platform. And again, it's if you're familiar with Headspace or the Calm app, there's been a movement towards mindfulness over the past year or two, which I think is really good and really helpful. This is kind of in that vein. It's no video, right? It's just soft music playing and some reflections for you to work through around your mindset. And we can give you all the tools in the world, but if you don't get your mindset right, like, leadership is always going to be a struggle. Life is always going to be a struggle, no matter how much information you have, no matter how many tools are in your tool belt. Like, it's all a mental battle first. So I could not be more excited about this series. I would, if you're a leader, make this series a priority. And if you're listening to this, you are a leader, right? I don't care what your title is. You need to make this series a priority. Again, like Tracy said, once a morning or every morning, once a week, find your rhythm with this series. I think it's going to be really critical and will lead to not just information, but transformation.
So good. Yeah. So many of you are joining us through either LinkedIn or Facebook. And so you might be going, well, where is this? So this is on the Giant platform. So you're all invited to have a free account forever on giant.tv/free account. And once you go there, I'll just show you where you navigate. So this is that Ascend free account that I'm talking about. If you go to this drop-down menu and press Ascend, you'll see our live streams here at the top. And then if you come down here to Popular Series, go all the way to the right and click on View All. And then here are all of our series that we offer. Dig into any of those. But right up here at the top is where the Mindset Matters is setting right now. So just click on there and you'll see the 16 different episodes. Really good. Our colleague and friend Chris Ediger put these together, and he just did a fantastic job. So I really encourage you to try that. Do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, it's a really critical series. Mindset is one of those things. If you're on the call with us, you're probably interested in mindset, but it can be kind of this fluffy, nebulous, weird thing. It's critical. Like, it is critical to life. And Chris has put together an unbelievable series that will lead to transformation if you make some time for it. Again, not tons of time. 5 minutes. 5 minutes will make you better.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that's good. That's a good word. And I know that many of our viewers are not even in the United States. So I'm sorry that we talked about a little bit about the election. It's not your world, but I'm sure you hear. We have some of our clients around the world reaching out to us, going with different opinions, and things. So, so thanks for hanging in there with us. For those of you who are outside the U.S. So any final words before we go, Phil?
Yeah, I think when it comes to mindset, right, you have to decide who you're going to be and then go be it. All right, decide who you're going to be and then go be it, regardless of circumstances, regardless of events, regardless of what's going on around you. Decide who you are. Say, this is who I am. Like, if you need to, write it down, but get really crystal clear about who you are, about your values, and about your standard, and then go live it. Like, hold yourself accountable. Say, whatever's going on around me, this is who I am committed to being. When you do that, life will get better and influence will go up.
Great last word. Thank you. Great. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next Monday.
Have a good one.